welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to be doing something that I'm going to enjoy doing because it's a special thing. One of the great things about working for this company is that almost everybody that works there is a quilter. And I know that this is a quilting industry, but not everybody that works in the industry actually quilts. And so that's kind of a fun thing for us. I know that, of course, Patricia quilts, and I think what makes Patricia such a great quilter and businesswoman is that she first started as a graphic designer or jewelry designer. She started in the design world before she got into quilting, so she has a very good foundation in the arts. And as time went on and we started doing shows, one of the people that I was often at market or festival with was Judy, and the quilt that you saw in the opening on the frame is one of Judy's quilts. It's a Bargello, and I know that she's been working on and off on this quilt for most of the year, and that's because we keep her pretty busy with customer service and shipping. So she works on it when she gets a chance and when we haven't worn her out. But one of the other special things about this today is that we're actually going to be using a design that she designed herself. So she designed it and Patricia digitized it, so it was a joint effort. So that's what we're going to be doing. The design is called, it's one of those things, it's caramel. I didn't know if it was, I was going to say caramel. The design is only 5.5 inches high, and this quilt is almost 100 inches square. So normally I would not be using a 5-inch design on a quilt this size, but this is just another one of the factors that comes into influencing what kind of design we would choose to make a quilt. Often it is the print in the fabric. Sometimes we would pick up one of the motifs in a pattern. Could be a leaf or a floral or a spaceship, a tennis ball. Sometimes it is something in the pieced pattern where we would use a lot of geometric lines in the piecing, and then we would use curved designs in the quilting pattern, or the opposite. It could be curves in the piecing and the applique, and we would use geometrics. But in this case we're going to be doing something because it would be more sentimental, and sentimentality is certainly a reason for choosing a quilting design. So I'm going to go over and pull this over to the machine. As I said, this quilt is somewhere around 96 by 97, so it's not quite 100 inches square, but pretty close. And it's a really beautiful collection of blues, purples, and aquas. Reminds me very much of water, kind of like Cozumel or something, which almost made me get confused with the caramel, Cozumel. But we're going to go ahead and do that with the design, her design. And I'm going to try and go through some of my photos if I get a chance and pop a picture up so that some of you who haven't seen Judy would know, put a face to the name. She'll kill me. But so many of you have seen Judy at market also, so she's very fun. I will also say every single morning Judy sends me a positive, encouraging quote. She sends me a text every morning, and many days that helps me get going or get me through the day, because sometimes I have rough days taking care of my mom or something going on here at the house. So that's been a real lifesaver, real pick-me-up. So this is like the least thing I could do for Judy. So we're going to go ahead and move the camera and start picking the design, but you know how quick this goes. With the IntelliQuilter, it really only takes probably, I would say probably less than 30 seconds to choose a design and get it loaded and start sewing. The IntelliQuilter is so easy to use and so easy to get started, so it doesn't take very long. The only different thing today, Judy wanted cotton thread. We're going to be using a King Tut. It's a variegated thread that very, very much matches the quilt top and back. So we have the same thread in the top and bottom. I haven't been using a lot of cotton thread in the Bernina because for some reason in the Bernina it lints up in the bobbin case really bad. But I do have a really nice stick vacuum that will help clean that out, and I'll make sure to do that when I'm changing bobbins or at the end of rows. And I'll show you how linty it gets. Normally I don't have to clean the bobbin area at all during a quilt while I'm quilting, but I'll show you how linty it gets with the cotton. It's not a deterrent. It doesn't affect the tension or anything else in that way. I guess it's just kind of a nuisance a little bit, but we shall proceed. Okay, I'm on my main menu. I'm going to choose Design Sew Quilt. I'm going to start new, and I'm going to erase what's in progress, permanently erase it, and I'm going to reset my clock. I personally never monitor my clock or my stitches. I am going to be using a Pantograph, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to enter the rectangle manually. My actual size of the width is 96, so I'm going to say, let's say 99 for right now, and the actual length is 97, so I'm going to put 100 for right now and continue. And that square is the representation of the quilt top, so I'll hit finished. I just downloaded Judy's design, so it's still going to be in my downloads. The name is C, so I'll hit C for caramel, because I can spell. There it is. Bring that in twice for the even and odd rows, and you can see there's a lot of space in between, and the height of this design now is 12 inches and it needs to be 5.5. So first I'm going to address this big gap. So I don't want them to touch, but I do want them to be a little bit closer together. And now the pattern height is 18.5 inches, and we need to get that down to 5.5. So I'm going to touch row height, which is 12 inches, but what we really want to adjust is this number down here below at the pattern height, and that's never going to highlight, but we can adjust it by moving the row height. So row height will be changing, but what we're looking for is the pattern height to get down to about 5.5. And we can use the numbers here by punching in numbers, but we don't know what number is going to bring us to the 5.5 in the pattern height. So we could use the I'm just going to put in a number. That brought us down to 12.3. It's still not right, so I'm just going to use my finger. You could also use the plus and minus here, but I'm just going to use my finger until we get down to, right now we're at 5.519, and you can see the pattern looks a lot denser on here, but that's because we're looking at the overall quilt. So the row height says 3.58, but what we're looking for is the pattern height at 5.519. If I look at the, turn the zoom off and look at true size, true size, that's the size that it's going to sew out. So that's certainly fine. You can see the space in between is pretty good all the way around. I could separate the gap a little bit more. If I wanted to make the gap about the same size as the space in between the stitching, and I think I might do that, and then I can go ahead and push start. Okay, I have the gap the way I like it, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Sew Quilt. I'm going to use Panto Sequency in case I can't do the whole thing at one day, and I'm going to choose the first pattern if I can get it. Oh, I did it. Do I want to swap endpoints? No. I'm going to do Panto sequencing, and I'm going to do the whole quilt. So I'm going to do alternate rows. I'm going to tie off at the ends, and I'm going to do the whole quilt. And now you can see that the if you look careful, every other row is a different shade of green, and that just tells you which one's going to sew left to right and right to left, and it also helps you keep track of how many rows. And this one actually has 28 rows that are going to sew out, but the nice thing is that I'm going to be able to sew out several rows between rolling up, so I'm not going to have to roll up 28 times. So I can go ahead and hit Sew Quilt, and it's going to move to my first sewing port, move to manual. Because the machine sews left to right, while I'm over here I might as well just sew right to left when I'm done, so I figure that's the way I should just do it. Seems like it saves time. And the way a Panto sews, it sews north, south, east, west, top, bottom, right, left, no matter how you look at it. So I can't understand why people sew my machine won't sew right to left or left to right. I've never understood that with the long arm machine, because they're designed to sew in all directions. I mean, they have to be in order to do free motion quilting, in order to do a Panto, in order to do ruler work. They all go in all directions. So I got to the end of the row, the machine quit sewing, so I raised my needle up and my hopper foot, and I'm going to push start. It's going to go to the start of number 2. It took a stitch to anchor the thread, and I'm going to hit start. And we're off and running just like that. So sequencing the whole quilt is really great for that reason. It gets the whole quilt done. And if for some reason I need to pause to go to the store, or if something happens I need to quit for the day, or I just get bored and tired, I can go ahead and save my needle position and restart tomorrow, realign wherever I'm at, and start right back where I was. And the IQ will keep track of how many rows I've done. Well, the quilt is off the frame, but there's no quilting in it. I had done the quilting, I had done some quilting. When I did the first test, I looked on the back and the tension seemed fine. But as I got more quilting done and rolled up, the quilting wasn't fine. It was intermittently getting really bad quilting on the back. I had, remember that the design is only about 5 inches high, and by the time I'd rolled up and gotten back there and looked, I had done 10 rows. So I couldn't just rip the parts that were bad and get it connected back again, because there was too many of them. So I ended up having to take the quilt off the frame and rip the entire 10 rows out. Well, that took me the better part of a month. So here we are back again, and I'm about to put the quilt back on the frame. So this is just a reminder that we all make mistakes, and it's a good time to really test the tension, both the top and the bottom, before you get started. And that's why I like to keep a test sandwich in the studio all the time. I had one on the frame in between while I've been ripping the stitches out of this one very carefully. I always rip from the back, and I rip very, very carefully. But I have been testing, doing some samples videos, and I have a quilt sandwich there, so I didn't mind running over the same places that I've stitched before because it's just a sample. So the first ones that I did were just some free motion quilting, and then when I got the results I was looking for, then I went ahead and did some of the actual design. I did a whole row and stitched it out before I'm going to take the quilt sandwich off. And what I'm going to do with the quilt sandwich is I'm going to roll it up onto a pool noodle, and keep that here in the studio because I can always throw that back on the machine whenever I need to test anything, either a pattern, a concept, or tension. And so it's a good idea to keep those handy, and you don't have to keep making them over and over. So I'll take that off and put it on a pool noodle and get it wrapped up and stored here in the studio. You could even make a little envelope out of plastic or even scrap fabric if you wanted. But then I'm going to go ahead and get this loaded again and get it started. The funny thing is that I had to go all the way up to 7 on my top tension, which is a lot higher than I ever thought I would, but I'm not used to using cotton on my Bernina anymore. I'm used to using isocord, and I don't usually ever have to go much higher than the standard on the machine, the preset setting. So I'm going to go ahead and get my sandwich off. I might show you where I did some of the test stitching before I take the sample off, but then we'll go ahead and get this reloaded and start all over again. Here is where I was just doing some loops to make sure I wasn't getting any eyelashes on the back, and I was going both at a very high rate of speed here and then just at BSR 1. After I did that and rolled it back to see the back, then I went ahead and rolled it forward again, and I went ahead and set up one row, and you can see one row stitched out here, and then I pulled that back again, and the backing looked just as good as it does from the front. Again, the setting is 7.0 for the top setting, which is a lot higher than I've had to use before, but that's what the thread requires, so that's what I'm going to stitch it on. I'm going to go ahead and get the quilt sandwich off and rolled onto a pool noodle, and then we can get the Bargello quilt loaded again and get started. Well, I have the quilt back on the machine, and I think I'm on the 16th row, but remember the design is only about 5.5 inches high. About this time I'm going to go over and show you what some of the stitch out looks like, but this is this is all of the top thread that I pulled out of the quilt. While I was ripping the stitching, I was ripping out the back, and I was ripping out those stitches, just a few stitches at a time. So I didn't take out the front stitching until I got it loaded on the quilt frame. And so all of that was ripping out almost in whole rows, because the back I took out very carefully in smaller sections. So I pulled all these sections out, and this is pretty much all the thread that came from that. And it kind of reminds me, now that I look at it, of a really bad perm I had when I was in high school. So both of those regrettable memories. But it just goes to show you that at any stage you can make a tension mistake. So it always bears in mind to keep checking that. I've been checking every single bobbin on that I put on this one, and I think I've been getting about 4 rows, maybe 3.5 rows between bobbins, but I've been checking every single one. And again, I'm a little surprised that this King Tut thread has had to go to a top tension of 7 to get it to stitch out adequately, but that's where we're at. So next clip will be me showing you what the stitch out is looking like, and you'll get to see for yourself. Well, this may be the longest project that I've ever worked on the long arm. Again, this is a design called Caramel by my friend Judy, and why it took so long was my fault because I wasn't checking the tension. So this video will be more about tension than probably anything else. I was using King Tut thread, which I haven't used in a long time on my Bernina. And I was checking the bottom tension very rigorously with my toe gauge, but it was the top tension that was causing the issue. And I've never had to go this high with my top tension, but for this quilt I had to go to a 7.0 all the way up from a 4. So that was kind of unusual for me, but I had to do it for the entire quilt. And after I made those changes, then the entire quilt stitched out beautifully. But in the beginning, I had stitched out 10 rows, and the stitching wasn't showing up that it was really bad on the dark backing while it was on the frame. But after I got the 10 rows, and remember the rows are only about 4 inches high. After I got 10 rows and I got enough rolled up where I could see it, I was really getting a lot of eyelashing on the back. And so with 10 rows done, I knew I was going to have to take the quilt off the frame and carefully rip all of that, and that took a full month. So that's why it was the longest project. And in the end, because it is a smaller design, it was 27 rows of stitching, but it really did come out beautiful. It's a really beautiful curved design, undulating up and down, and the King Tut thread, which is variegated, it's the same color on the front and back, really looks beautiful on this Bargello. So I'm glad that I took the time to make sure it was done right, and I'm sure Judy's going to appreciate it as well. So I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer so you can see the design and the stitching, and I'll flip the quilt over so you can see on the back as well, because that's where the issue was. And then we can go ahead and get this boxed up and ready to go. I think here in the lightest section you'll be able to see the stitching the best. I hope you can see that the stitching came out really nice on this side. Now I'm going to flip it over so we can see how well the stitching came out on the back as well. We also have the stitching on the black. I think you can see here that the stitching is coming out really well on the back as well. While it was on the frame and where some of the darker parts of the backing were disguising some of the bad stitching until I got enough rolled up where it was exposing all of the eyelashing. And it wasn't constant, it was intermittent, which was the problem. But it was so scattered throughout, even if I had ripped all of it and left the good stitching, there would have been no way to connect all the dots on it. So it was easier just to take it off the frame. So I am glad that we got all this finished, and it just goes to show you that at any stage, any quilter can have a problem with tension if you really don't keep up on it every step of the way. Tension isn't just a digital quilting issue, it's a quilting issue. So it doesn't matter if you're working on a domestic machine or a long arm machine. It could be an issue with tearaway, which is a single-use product. It could be with free motion quilting, and maybe even free motion quilting is probably the most problematic with tension. It could be using a design board Pantograph or any method of quilting that you choose, tension is always going to be issues, so you always have to keep an eye on it and keep on top of it. So that is primarily going to be my learning lesson for today. And as I said, I've been quilting for over 30 years, and so it's something that can sneak up on you at any stage. We're all still learning. I don't think we ever get there completely. I remember a famous chef said, "You never master a dish until you've cooked it 1,000 times." So I think that just goes to show that you really have to do something over and over and over and over and over again, not different things, the same exact thing, until you really, really, really understand it. And you may do it 500 times the exact same way, and 10 of those times it fails and you don't understand why. And there may not ever be any understanding why, but sometimes you just have to always pay attention to it. So that's my lesson for today. Thanks for spending this time with me in the studio. I know it was kind of jumbled and long. Things don't always go smoothly as you plan them to be, but that is life, and we have to roll with the punches. We look forward to seeing you again here next time in the Urban Elements studio. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.